And there's always a lot of grain. I tend to have a lot of grain come through the false bottom.
You have one of those false bottoms that just kind of sits on the
yeah,
bottom.
it's just the dome. It's just the dome
with those.
Yeah, just the dome with the high temp hose on there. So if you can filter it in any way possible, great. But it doesn't sound as it's a big issue overall.
Yeah,
right.
My personal preference, I like crystal clear wort.
Me too.
I just like that.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things, if something's wrong with my beer, well, I can count that out as a
absolutely.
cause. You know, I can cross that off my list. And I just like it to be nice and clear and that kind of thing. So I think if you want it to be clear, do all these things we're talking about. If it's just a little bit of grain in there, I don't think you need to worry about it.
Honestly, none of my worts have been, or maybe one or two have been really crystal clear, but hardly any of them have been really clear. They're mostly cloudy. And most of my beers have turned out quite well.
Yeah.
Or at least
well, a lot of it has to do with the
consideration.
protein content in the malt and that kind of thing,
Right.
too. There's more to it than that. But
You shouldn't have a lot of harm coming from it.
No.
In the overall, it's really what the key there is. And now, like aging the beer out, things like that, you may run into some things, and that's something to think about. But beyond that, if you're making it for the short term, you should be good to go.
you should be drinking them
Right.
for 3 months after it's made anyway.
Right. Exactly.
Months? Weeks.
Unless it's a barley wine or something, you
Weeks.
might run into that.
Depends
So-
on how many friends you have.
Do we want to move on to
let's move on to our next segment here, which are we calling this out by name, or is that what we're doing here? Or
Could be unsolicited answers to internet questions. It doesn't matter.
Let's call it internet questions for now.
yeah, so I read a lot of homebrewing stuff on the internet and various forums and that kind of thing, and I thought it might be fun that when I see questions about things that I think are common mistakes that newer and even some more experienced homebrewers make, I think it's a good idea to call those out and address them.
Right.
And so we've got a couple here that I noticed recently that are a couple. These are actually both pet peeves of mine that I think, we go through all this trouble buying equipment and being very particular how we do everything on brew day and all that thing. And then we all have some part of the brewing process that we're kind of lackadaisical about. And we do stupid things at really important times in the brew.
Right.
Because, let's face it, the fermentation side of it is not fun like the brew day side of it is and that kind of thing. And so I think it's important to address a couple of these. So we have a couple of questions that were posted on a pretty well-known internet forum recently, and I just thought it would be good to address them. The first one is doing things just because a recipe says so. So the question as it was posted was how to adjust pH with an acid blend. It says, hi, y'all. I've been making a Vienna lager with RO water this weekend, but I need help with something. In this recipe, which I'm using as the basis for mine, it calls for lactic acid to adjust the pH. I don't have access to that, but I do have an acid blend of malic and tartaric acids. How much would I need to get the equivalent?
What did you say? Tartaric acids?
Tartaric acids.
Oh, I thought you said acids.
Tartaric acids. I think
Same
that's where
thing.
they get the acids from, are acids, actually.
okay.
So it's an ass
It's
derivative.
the cream of tartar from the acids.
Oh, cream.
Nice.
Damn.
Well, that's what tartaric acid is. It's cream
Step
of
off
tartar.
of ointment.
So this addresses a larger topic
Good ignore.
that I see a few times. And actually, Nigel has brought in Adam's Broadside a couple of times, which is probably my second favorite English beer that you brought in. I really, really like it a lot.
Behind every other one I've brewed.
Well, yeah, I lumped those all into one
Right.
category, and then there's Nigel's beer, and then the rest of England is how I look at it.
Okay, I
So-
should update this real quick. James Trimble has just sent me a text saying only kidding. He's wussed out.
Oh,
Firefighters.
it just got real.
Carry on, Bren, sorry.
So when I was looking up clone recipes or notes for recipes for Adam's Broadside on the internet, a lot of people were talking about, I'm going to brew this. I guess they post a lot of information about how to brew their beer, and they use acidulated malt in their
Okay.
beer. And a lot of people have said, I'm going to brew it this time using the acidulated malt like they do and see how it comes out. And it's the same thing with this guy, where they've got a recipe that you're looking at that says use lactic acid to adjust the pH. Well, that's what acidulated malt is for, too. That's why they're using it, is to adjust the pH in their
Well,
beer.
it happens to do with a whole reason that they have acid malt is because the Reinheitsgebot, you can't actually add
Right.
anything to change the pH. So what they do is they go and they sour a bunch of malt, and then they throw it in there or they'll spray it with lactic acid. And the reason being is because they're not allowed to do any pH modifications on their beers in Germany. I mean, that's just part of the thing. So
and so that's the reason that malt exists. If you
Exactly.
see that in a recipe, that's why it's there, is to adjust the pH. And for you to say this recipe has lactic acid in it, so I'm going to put lactic acid in it, is a terrible idea.
yeah,
Those people are adjusting the pH of their mash based on their water, on their system, in their part of the country or whatever, and it's not going to be the same as yours. If you are going to adjust the pH in your beer, you need to measure the pH in your beer and also look at your like bicarbonate content and that kind of thing, your buffering agents, and use a tool to tell you how much acid to add into it to do it. Don't ever look at a recipe that says use acidulated malt or that says use lactic acid and use those as though they are ingredients.
right.
Your
Because it's
water
not what they
profile,
are.
your water profile is going to determine that, right?
Right.
And you know, you can do some fun things with acid malt if you want. You know, you can make a goza with acid malt. You know, it's not going to be like super sour or anything like that. But if you're doing all grain, you have to do your mash first and then basically do a steep with the acid malt. So, I mean, you can use it for other fun things, or maybe add a little bit in at the end of their mash for, let's say, at mash out to make a saison a little more bright or something.
And here's
but-
the thing about using it in the mash too. I have found that you can use enough acidulated malt in your mash to affect the flavor.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you're going to completely screw up your mash pH if you
Well,
use that much
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
You want to add it at the end.
at the end. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
at the
Yeah,
end of
just
the
to
mash.
kind of wash the lactic acid into
Right.
it.
Or you could even, you know what you could even do, if you wanted just the acid flavor, you could just take it in a muslin bag and stick it in your boil during the runoff.
Well, you know what I did, one of the beers I scored first place in competition with was a rye saison that I do, and I brought it in for Stubby to taste, and he says, you know what would be good? Put a drop of lactic acid in each bottle. And I did that, and I got first place with that beer. So you can add lactic acid straight in. You don't want to do that to make a sour beer.
You don't do competitions.
Well, it's been a long time. Yeah, this was a long time ago. And but you can put it in there to put a little bit of a tart note or a little just a touch on there. You don't want to just pour it in to make a sour beer because it'll be a real one-dimensional.
But I think we kind of jumped the shark there a little bit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, ultimately, I guess there's so many different things that people may or may not do. I guess ultimately the point is that, you know, when you're – and we're gonna kind of do this on a regular basis for, you know, for different what – we're gonna kind of feed through the forums and stuff, and maybe look at some recipes and maybe critique them a little bit.
Oh yeah, we
because
have.
I think a lot of times that people get these. I had one guy come in one day, and I'm not lying to you. It had maybe 11, 12 pounds of grain in it, and 6 pounds of it was Crystal 60.
Jeez.
And I'm just like,
What's wrong with that?
you probably got 500 people all over the U.S. making this beer and going, "Oh my God, this is absolute shit." And I almost wonder if some of these assholes are actually going
just
out
putting
there.
it out there.
"Man,
Just
you should taste this recipe. It's fantastic. It's so good."
That sounds like a hipster move.
You don't know.
So angry.
I drink this while I ride my unicycle to work.
and
Taking a shot at
waxing
Jimmy.
your
Really
mustache.
long mustache
Right? Yeah.
takes me.
So, but that's
Hey, you're
one of the
pissing
things
off
that
more than half of our audience, dude.
Well, you know, that's one of the things I agree, though. If you're going to take recipes off the internet and just start using them, if it's not somebody that you trust and that you know that you're getting these from, or a book, you know, books are pretty reliable normally. You need to be able to recognize certain things in recipes that are there and why they're there, what they're there to accomplish. And in
Exactly.
this case, if there's any type of acid addition, whether it's lactic acid or phosphoric acid or acidulated malt or anything like that, there's a purpose for that. And it's not for the flavor in the recipe or anything like that. That's strictly a utility that's in there to adjust pH. And
For
one
their
person's
water
pH is
and-
not
yeah.
going to be another person's pH, and you need to ignore that. If you want to make pH adjustments, and I encourage people that when they get to the point where they're starting to look at their water, that they do look at their mash pH and kind of understand what it is, but do it on your mash. Use a pH meter.
Get your water
strip-
report.
Yeah, get your water report.
Go get it analyzed if you have to. So.
And that's one of the things that we had a big discussion, I guess, this week, and with one of my customers here, and that was a big. He was trying to adjust his water, and I said, man, I hate to give you any kind of insight on that, and I said, go back and listen to our water episodes, because I think those are kind of a good basis to get started.
I think so, yeah.
And get your water tested at home, because it was quite amazing. Even a lot of us that we all went to our house and filled up the same sort of bottles, we all had different results, even the people that were on the same water source.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Not far from each other at all.
Right. So, I think that, even though, I'm on a different water source than you guys, it was drastically different than here at the store. And so those are things. And I think if you get a baseline on your water at home, you could probably do the same kind of treatments, but just keep in mind it is going to change throughout the year.
Right.
The one thing that I wanted to add on to what Brandon was saying before Stubby added all the information that is kind of blows what I was about to say out of the water.
Good one, Stubby.
Thanks for taking out of all of my newbie advice away.
Also, and go to, what is it, Ward Labs?
Ward Labs.
Ward Labs.
Ward Labs.
Word Lab.
Yeah, wardlab.com.
Wordlab.com.
Lab, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell them
There's
Come
just
and
one
Brew It
lab.
sent you.
Yeah, come and brew it.
I have come across a couple of recipes on the interwebs, the blogosphere, that say that this is the pH that we had here. This is our water profile that we're using, and a couple of them that start off with RO water that they got from the grocery store. This is using Ozarka water, etc. And here's what we added on top of that to get the profile that we want. And if you really want to duplicate something exactly from a blog that you've read on the internet, contact those people and say, hey, what water are you using? What is your water profile?
Yeah.
And how can I duplicate it
Well,
exactly?
and that's funny. That's funny you brought that up, bottled water, because
I know it's not
we
exactly the
and the only
same.
reason I say that is because we were using a local water company here for our brewing, right? We just assumed it was probably really soft and probably be great for maybe pilsners or
It was spring
lagers.
water, wasn't it?
Yeah, spring drinking water, right?
Mhm.
And we actually had that analyzed as well, and we would have been better off using our
Tap water.
tap water.
Wow.
I mean, for the style of beers that we thought that water would be appropriate for. So I just assumed, it's probably RO, and they just add a little bit of, flavor back to it, with some minerals and stuff, so it just doesn't taste like anything, right?
Got to check it.
So I used to be a proponent of doing, the bottled water thing, but I'm not so sure. This was spring water, so it's one of those things. It's kind of you got to be careful with what you do. But I would say this though, however, is if you do use a spring drinking water and you know what's in it, you're probably going to get the same thing every single time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. It should be real consistent.
And you should be getting that too with the brands that you buy. It's like what Chris said, if you found out that they said it's this specific brand of water, they added this amount of everything, that recipe you should be pretty close to being able to dial in. It's all then going to be based more on if you know your system and you know what you got, like whether or not you have a good grist to put into it and how it was milled and whatnot, all those kind of things. Much more so than say, I just tried to mess with my water or this water, that water. But, I think it would be, I think you get a lot more out of that. So just think about those things, don't just take whatever's in the recipe exactly. And also always pay attention to, the little things like what volume did they build it at? How did they brew it? All those things. You're going to have a different version. If you brewed it on a 15-gallon system and they brewed it in a 3-gallon pot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So,
And there is a possibility these water companies have got more than one bottling plant, right?
There is, but they. I mean, that's
They're
like,
going to be close.
you're still
but-
talking about, like, if you're saying Ozarka, that's like saying Coors Light, more or less, where they're trying to make the same product across the nation, you know. So it
Whereas
should
if you
be.
But there's going to be slight differences.
It should be right in that line.
Right.
If
But
you go with
know,
a store brand like Kroger, HEB, Randall's, Tom,
and then and
they're
still like
a
Ozarka is usually
municipal
making that
source.
kind of stuff. Whatever the water companies that are out there, but they're just making it under another label. But I don't know.
Right.
That's another topic.
Yeah.
Do we want to continue with our unsolicited answers,
How,
or do
how
we want
far
to
are we
move
in here?
forward?
Do we need to take a break? Or
I think we're still pretty good.
okay.
Or do we want to move into wheat and
No, we'll do wheat on the next segment.
Yeah,
but
let's
I
do
think-
that.
do we
after
want
the
to do
break.
wheat and Nigel's thing in the next segment? Probably.
You
Yeah.
can keep my
Okay.
thing out of it.
Keep moving
Nigel, whip your thing
further and
out,
further down
would
the
you
line.
please?
Oh,
Brandon
my
wants
God.
to do your thing, so he told me earlier.
I've heard about that.
We've got a lot of things to do here. If we don't get around to all of the things that we wanted to do, whether it be Nigel's thing or my thing or whatever, you know, those things will still be around next week.
Well,
we can.
We would
Brandon's
assume-
next thing is talking about moving things around a lot.
Well, in
sticking
this
the
one,
wrong,
you
sticking
deleted
things
the-
in the wrong places.
You
so.
deleted the part that was the main thing that
No,
I was talking about on this.
it's very
Is
He
that
just,
the thing with the
a guy
solid
brewed a
base
beer
thing?
and he put it in one location, and
then
it got crazy.
He thought that was fermenting too vigorously, and he got scared. So then he took it and he like put it outside, and it got cold. And then so he moved it back in the house, and then it got warmer. And his worry was, while I know primary isn't over per se, as I only brewed this baby on Saturday, I think the vigorous stuff is pretty much out of the way because it was rocking and rolling at 65 and maintained that temperature through Sunday night early, well into midday Monday. My question is, what temperature does yeast need after vigorous fermentation to do its cleaning up? My basement is about 50, and I'm keeping it off the floor. My point in
True
this
call.
was in the period of about 3 days, this guy pitched his yeast, had it in a warm environment where it was going crazy, put it in a cold environment where it calmed down, brought it back into a warmer environment. He's 3 days into this, and
Gone
he's
through 4
thinking, oh,
temperatures.
well, how warm do I have to keep this now to clean it up again?
Well,
And I thought, dude,
he screwed up when he stuck
He's
it
done.
outside because your yeast is you're going to knock it out of suspension first off.
well, and you know, just as though the wrong temperature is a stressor on yeast, the next worst thing you can do is constantly change the temperature.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
That is a huge stressor on yeast. It's a terrible idea.
You know what they do? They go, screw you, I'm going to the bottom.
Yep.
That's exactly what they do.
And they put off all kinds of nasty stuff. And if this doesn't clean up, even if he puts it to the right temperature to let it sit there and clean up, that yeast may already be done.
Yeah.
You know,
Probably would have been
and-
better off staying at 65 the whole time.
or even if it's too hot.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, you need to make a decision on where your fermentation is going to be and how you're going to control your temperature, and you need to stick with it unless it gets really like, you know, you come in, you're like, shit, it's 85 degrees in here. That may be an issue.
It's already gone.
But let's
Yeah.
face it, right?
But-
Vigorous fermentation just means it's created a great environment for that yeast to live in.
Yeah.
Or it might be too hot, but I
Either
think
way,
it's
it's
better off letting it
active.
finish off
But if
and
they're,
too hot.
if they're at 65, that's not the case, right?
Dude, I've blown the lid off of shit with 62 degrees.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
definitely. And then vigorous fermentation also creates heat.
Right.
So you know,
Yeah.
there's that part too. Now, see, I didn't see that. Reading through that, the part about putting it outside doesn't register to me.
It may
But
not
like,
have been outside, but he basically took it from a warm environment where it was going crazy to
Right.
a cold place, and then back to a little bit warmer place.
Yeah.
In the period of about 3 days.
yeah, and that's
He did
that.
this.
His whole concept was like, man, this thing went crazy. It made a mess. I put it in this one room where, you know, my wife let me keep it, which was more like open air mud room. So it's sort of in between inside and outside. That was my thought on this. Was if you're going to move it around a lot, and he's like, where should I put it next? What should I do? Those kind of things. Like, why are you moving it in the first place? Why
Right.
did you not just keep it in the coolest place you could keep it? Because he said he had a basement that was at 50 something. I'd rather put it down there and let it go slow than put it in a mud room and in the attic and then outside and then
Well,
the
and
garage.
it depends on the yeast.
Fireplace.
Next
That's
to
the thing, too, is he
fireplace,
didn't
yeah.
talk about what yeast it was either.
Yeah, he didn't.
And there's no one answer for
Or
this
what-
because
yeah.
his main question was, his too long didn't read, was what temperature do yeast need to clean up in primary?
Yes.
Well,
They don't clean up at primary.
What-
They clean up
what
at secondary.
yeast?
What are they cleaning up now?
Well, they
What
clean-
what
well,
did
they
you
clean
do
up.
in the first place?
Right.
Yeah.
They clean up wherever you leave them. They'll clean up in primary. They'll clean up in
Well,
secondary. Doesn't matter
yeah.
what vessel they're in. But there is no one answer to what temperature they need to be at to clean up. And especially when you've done what you did, you just beat them up. You just pissed them off. You did everything you could. You had them in the wrong temperature to start with, and then you changed the temperature over and over again. It's like doing
It's a roller coaster ride.
It's doing something terrible and then making it worse. And
Right. So the
Stress
most
them
critical
and stress them
period.
worse.
The most critical period is the first 48 hours, right? So if you
Yeah.
moved it after the first 48 hours,
I don't think he did because
right.
this was all like 3 days that he did this.
even if he did, there's still got some work to do after that.
Oh yeah.
Now it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
say it may not be the most critical period, but there's still got work left to do.
Well, see, and we don't even know what the gravity of the beer was either. A high gravity beer is going to be much
Right.
different than a low gravity beer. You know, if he's down in the 4% range after
Yeah.
2 days, you know, it's probably done doing what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Again, depending on the yeast.
Mhm.
So this is one of those where I was talking about. We get hung up in the fun parts of brewing that we like to do, the actual brew day and the drinking of it and all that.
So what's
And here's the most important part of his entire beer was the fermentation, and he apparently didn't think it through even a little bit.
Right.
so what's the chances of following through with this and finding out what the outcome was?
Well, I can find the post again and ask how it came out. But,
It's recent stuff.
Yeah, within the last week or so.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to find
Yeah.
out how
Yeah.
what the outcome was, what the beer was, what the gravity was, and how it turned out.
Yeah, that would be interesting to find
It was
out.
a very recent post, so I think that, you know.
But I think my takeaway from it was if you screw up, don't make it worse. If you think you put it in too warm an
Yeah,
environment,
I hear
let
it.
it finish out and do its thing and see how it came out
And learn from it.
and
Yeah.
learn from that.
I
Now
think-
you don't have any idea.
I think that's a very common problem with beginners. Is
Yeah.
they're overzealous and they just get to the point to where they're freaking out and they overthink it. And I mean, I think Papazian said it perfect. Just relax, have a home brew because I think a lot of people when they start home brewing, a lot of the times they think instantly they want to make the best beer they possibly can right out of the box, and I understand that. You don't want to make shit, but I think a lot of times people really don't understand that this is a big thing. I mean, there's lots of different aspects to making beer. Does that mean that you can't make great beer at home real quickly or real easily? No.
Nope.
I mean, no. I mean, you can make beer easily, but it's a craft that you have to hone and you have to learn
And part of that is being able to track where you did things right and where you did things
Right.
wrong.
And
when you do
Definitely.
this to your fermentation, you're not going to have any idea.
right, and also I think a lot of it is you are developing your palate too, because
Yeah.
when I first started brewing, man, I used to think a lot of my beers were freaking fantastic, man, and a lot of home brewers, they really, especially when they're newer, they really get hung up on they get married to a beer, and I do that sometimes too when I spend a lot of time on a beer and I spend a lot of money on it and I just want to like it, damn it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just don't turn out right, and
I can't quit you.
I know, you just you just got to look back. You just got to look back and spit on it sometimes.
Yeah. So well, it's better wet than dry, right?
I could tell you tried not to say that and failed.
So being new enough in brewing to remember my first beers and first issues, especially with fermentation issues and what was working, what wasn't. You're right, we overthink things. It's a case of, have I done everything they told me? And if I haven't done everything they've told me, what have I missed and what can I do to compensate for it?
Right.
And if I compensate for it, is that changing anything? And, there's a lot of unanswered questions that suddenly pop into the new brewer's head, and now it's a case of, I don't want to ruin this. So
Right.
what do I do? And
Typically,
some-
it'd end up overcompensating.
yeah, that's right.
And then they start reading forums, and
Yes.
people are,
Right.
Yes.
Sometimes you just got to ride it out. You've done what you're going to do. You better let it just.
And I think we've proven
Finish.
tonight, if it's on the internet, it isn't necessarily true.
This is
Especially-
groundbreaking information.
It is. This is. Yeah, we should have a news
You heard
flash
it here
jingle
first.
for this, right?
Yes.
As an even
Fake
newer
news.
brewer
Fake news.
than Nigel, I have to say that the reactionary really comes into play, especially when something seems to be going wrong very quickly. You assume it's like cooking. You go, oh, there's smoke coming out of the oven. I need to take it out of the oven right now.
I burned it.
That's a good point.
I've burned
Yeah.
it. Or, oh my God, it's exploding. I need to fix it right now.
So you're
Well-
fermenting in the oven?
Yeah, well, and that's where it's supposed to be fermenting at exactly 120 degrees.
There you go.
Yeah, if you're doing a sour.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I-
it's one of those you
Kettle
need to
sour.
fix it right now, or else it's ruined. You need to fix this right now, or it's
Well-
ruined. And it's
And that's really not the case with
it's not the
brewing.
case
Yeah,
with
you're
a
right.
lot of brewing. It's similar to cooking something all the way through to get a recipe correctly.
That's a good
you
analogy.
modify one bit at a time. You add a little more
Yeah.
salt, or you
Much
add
longer
a little
time
more
frame.
oregano,
Well,
or you
and I
make it
would
a little bit warmer.
I would even take
pee
that
in
a
the
step
oven.
further. Is you brew it once, you change it, you
Mhm.
brew it again, you change it,
Change
you brew it
something
again.
else. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you change one variable.
Yes.
You can't continually. I mean, and that's the thing is you got to be able to. And I always say this: if that guy had done that, and it was the best beer he had ever made, he'd never be able to
Never do it
reproduce
again.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
So those are some of the things that you've got to think. Every what is it? Every blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while,
Yeah.
and lightning in a bottle. I mean, it happens. Sometimes I've screwed up tremendously, and produced a fantastic beer, and then I've never gotten it close again. And I'm like, what the hell did I do to make it so good?
You know what? This could have been a wheat
Propane.
beer too. This could have been 3068 yeast. The Weizen
Oh, yeah.
yeast.
Yeah.
Vigorous fermentation is par for the course with that. You
Right.
know, I think you just put the yeast pack next to the fermenter and it starts to go nuts. So
It catches the fever.
it drove me nuts to see somebody like, oh, that's going crazy. I want to put it here. Oh, now it's not enough. I'm going to put it over here. And I thought, man, you're